Hello everyone and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. It began with an unsettling noise, deep in the folds of the long-abandoned Blackwood Asylum. The wind howled outside, rattling the cracked windows like skeletal fingers eager for release. But it was the sound within that drew Lola here. A faint, rhythmic tapping like a child's deranged heartbeat echoing through the stale air of dust and dread. This place had been forgotten by time, smothered under layers of urban decay and whispered legends, yet the thrill of something lingering stirred her curiosity and summoned her footsteps across the threshold of despair. Lola was a historian, a seeker of lost stories, though she often wondered if her pursuit was genuine or a desperate effort to escape her own. Recent weeks had taken a toll. Her mother's sudden passing, an estrangement from her brother, and the haunting solitude that clung to her like a second skin. She craved distraction, an anchor in the encroaching chaos of her life, and the allure of the asylum's dark secrets promised just that. Stepping into the hallway, she brushed her fingers along the peeling wallpaper, which whispered of lives once lived, and paused to inhale the musty, metallic odor that permeated the crumbling structure. With each step, the spiral of shadows tightened around her, drawing her deeper into the belly of the beast. The tapping sound grew louder, more insistent as she navigated the debris-laden corridors. It was as though the asylum itself was alive, yearning to communicate some unholy truth. The faint flicker of her flashlight danced across the walls, illuminating flickers of grotesque murals depicting twisted figures, faces frozen in agony or ecstasy, their eyes pleading for salvation. They felt almost sentient, and as the tapping quickened, so did her pulse, a symbiotic rhythm that blended with the pulse of the asylum. Drawn by an unseen force, she arrived before a heavy, rotting door, splintered and ajar. The room beyond emitted an oppressive weight that pressed against her chest. But curiosity won over caution, and she stepped inside. The air was cold, biting against her skin, and the tapping intensified, now mixed with something else. A soft, almost melodic whisper that slithered around her ears, chilling the marrow in her bones. In the corner stood an old wooden crib, its paint chipped, but more unsettling was what lay inside. A tattered blanket was draped over something amorphous, a shape that seemed to shift under the fabric. Compelled, she reached out, hand trembling, and peeled back the blanket. Beneath was a dark void, an unfathomable abyss that seemed to devour the light. She felt herself leaning closer, entranced, when a gust of cold wind surged through the room, slamming the door shut behind her. Panic clawed at her mind. The tapping echoed again, now an overwhelming cacophony that pushed against her sanity. Shadows danced across the walls, morphing grotesquely, and she felt a press of breath against her neck, a chilling whisper promising that she had just begun to comprehend the asylum's bitter truth. Suddenly, memories stole over her, uninvited, diving headlong into the troubled waters of her childhood. Her mother's haunting tales of the asylum bubbled to the surface, the stories woven with dread about what lay within. The children lost to madness, the experiments cloaked in darkness. Shaking, she focused on the crib as strange jumbled thoughts spiraled through her mind. Had she really come here to uncover stories, or was it something deeper, an echo of her own forgotten pain? The tapping crescendoed into a chaotic drumbeat, a terrible reminder that her personal tragedy had drawn her here, to the brink of madness. As the shadows pressed closer, she spotted a reflection in the cracked mirror on the wall. An apparition flickered behind her, a small figure with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. Her heart raced as she turned to confront the child, but the room had shifted. Helplessly, she spun back to the mirror, watching as the girl's expression twisted into something unrecognizably monstrous. The reflection was no longer innocent, it was suffocating anguish and pure rage. Panic surged again, but the shadows had morphed into tendrils snaking towards her. The whispers grew sharper, more insistent, urging her to remember, to reckon with her past. "You've come home, Lola," they hissed, as fingers of shadow intertwined around her wrists, yanking her into the depths of the mirror. The crib loomed larger than life, and she felt herself floating toward it, unable to resist the terrible gravity of the pain manifesting in spectral form. And there she understood, this was no mere haunt. She bore witness to the horrific echoes of her lineage, generations plagued by loss and isolation, trapped within the asylum's walls like moths ensnared in a web of despair. A final wave of realization crashed over her. She was not merely exploring a haunted space. She was walking the fragile edge of her heritage, a legacy of heartache spilling out from the depths of her own soul. The creatures whispered again, voices entwined with memories of her mother, a lamenting song carrying the weight of familial darkness. The tapping was no longer frantic, it was a dirge, a slow, mournful rhythm that wrapped around her, tightening its grip. She felt herself dissolve into the shadows, an offering to the void that had consumed so many before her. With a jarring suddenness, the room imploded, swirling into a maelstrom of lights and darkness, screaming with the souls that had witnessed this wretched cycle. Suddenly all was still, and the room fell silent. Dust hung in the air, and the walls stood unmoved, but she was no longer alone. Her essence merged with the tortured spirits of the asylum. She was a new narrative added to the horror, a tale echoing into eternity with the whispers of the lost and the agonized. And as the sun dipped low outside, shrouded by the asylum's derelict embrace, the tapping resumed. Soft and rhythmic, it melded into the fabric of the night, beckoning new souls to listen, to forget, and in their search for solace, become a part of the asylum's insatiable hunger for despair. The door stood ajar, an invitation for the next wanderer drawn by childhood scars or twilight whispers, unaware of what awaited them. The fog hung thick over the small coastal town of Greystone, a veil that obscured not only visibility but also reality. It was the kind of fog that smelled of brine and decay, wrapping around the weathered houses like the grasp of a long-dead lover. Beneath this oppressive mantle, residents whispered of disappearances and strange happenings. But for Emily Grayson, a post-grad researcher back home to care for her ailing mother, the horror lurked closer to the surface. Each misty morning brought with it an unsettling murmur, like the soft echoes of a warning bell, and with each passing day the call grew louder. Emily had never planned to return to Greystone. The memories of her childhood, intertwined with visions of the ocean's turbulent waves, were bittersweet. Her mother's illness had dragged her back, but it was the weight of unfinished questions from her past that began to creep in, nudging at the edges of her consciousness. Why had her best friend Lila vanished one stormy night a decade ago? The mystery lingered like a ghost, one that Emily had attempted to bury beneath years of school and ambition. Now it beckoned her, hungry for resolution. As she settled into the creaking family house, Emily noticed oddities that stretched far beyond her memories. The air felt different, charged with a static energy, and at night she heard the rhythmic sound of waves, not outside, but emanating from the walls themselves. She brushed it off as the symptoms of an overactive imagination fed by exhaustion, but when she caught glimpses of shadows shifting just out of sight, each moment of unease tightened its grip on her heart. An unsettling notion took root. What if Lila's fate was intertwined with her own, ensnared by the ghosts of this place? Weeks passed, a blur of research intertwined with fleeting reminders of Lila. Emily's mother grew weaker, a shell of the vibrant woman she once was. Amidst her mother's debilitating condition, Emily unearthed a decrepit box in the attic, filled with yellowed newspapers detailing bizarre occurrences in Greystone. Each article spoke of the missing, of whispered legends about the sea and an ancient curse, a pact made with forces from the deep. The words flickered in her mind like the street lamps on stormy nights, igniting her imagination and her fear, driven by a mix of desperation and curiosity. She began to uncover the hidden history that the town had tried to forget. She visited the old library, speaking to the town's librarian, who regarded her with wary eyes. "Some things are better left untouched, dear," she cautioned, her voice trembling like the paper that held the town's secrets. But Emily pressed on, relentless, piecing together connections between Lila's disappearance and other vanished souls, each one ensnared in the fog, each one swallowed by the ocean's hunger. Then came the night when the fog rolled in thicker than ever before, a tangible entity enveloping her home. Emily sat with her mother, whose breaths grew shallower, a rhythm that eased into an unnatural stillness. Something primal coiled in Emily's gut at the shift in the atmosphere. The once familiar sounds of the town were muffled, replaced by the distant hollow calls of the sea. When she turned to check on her mother, the old woman seemed to stare, beyond her, into a world that was not there. Sleek shadows flitted across the walls, and for the first time Emily felt a piercing terror settle in her bones. She sprinted to the door, flinging it open just as whispers filled the air, words that twined through the fog like siren songs, coaxing her toward the shore. The town lay sleeping, but the whispers thrummed insistently, a beckoning that sent shivers rippling through her skin. Drawn by an inexplicable force, she stumbled out into the damp, clammy night. The beach was a desolate landscape, the waves roaring with an anger that felt alive. In the darkness, the air shimmered with the faint glint of something beneath the surface. As she approached, a mound of sand shifted, revealing broken remnants of furniture, clothing, and something far more grotesque. An array of bones, bleached and cold, encased in seaweed. Emily recoiled, her heart hammering as the whispers grew. Louder now, a cacophony of distorted voices crying out for release. Panic surged through her, but the overwhelming need to understand compelled her to search further. She knelt, fingers sinking into the moist sand, trembling as she excavated a hidden pocket. A small locket, tarnished, but engraved with the initials LG. The realization crashed into her. This was Lila's. The sound of her laughter echoed in her memory. The world around her collapsed with the weight of implications twisting the very fabric of her reality. Suddenly, she was not alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow and mouths moving in soundless agony. They rose like phantoms from the depths, hauntingly familiar. The remnants of those lost to the tide, echoes of sorrow capturing a lifetime of longing. In that moment, Emily felt an awful connection. The sea had claimed them, had fed on their despair, and now it turned its insatiable hunger toward her. In a final act of desperation, Emily clutched the locket to her chest, almost as if it could shield her from their grasp. She turned and fled, stumbling back to her mother's house, heart racing, breath rasping, aware that the fog had now thickened dangerously, isolating her from all she once knew. Shadows chased her, the whispers now a furious roar, demanding her to join them, to become one with the lost. She threw herself into the house, slamming the door shut, but the cries reverberated within her, a clamor that felt all-consuming. Her mother lay unmoving, the silence oppressive. In that moment of despair, Emily understood the sickening truth. Her mother had been waiting, not to die, but to welcome her into this endless cycle. The curse of Greystone rested upon the family, a lineage bound by the sea's dark hunger, and Emily had unwittingly stood on the threshold of a deeper darkness. As the shadows pressed in, wrapping around her like a net, the realization consumed her. Lila had not disappeared. She had become part of the fog, one more lost soul tethered to the whispers of the tide. Now, Emily too was ensnared in this haunted inheritance. The shadows were not merely chasing her but calling her home. The weight of despair crashed upon her as the last remnants of her name faded into the night, leaving only the echoes of haunting laughter lingering in the salty breeze, the laughter of the lost. The night whispered secrets as Claire maneuvered through the abandoned corridors of Ashhaven Institute, the echoes of her footsteps swallowed by the oppressive silence. The oppressive weight of foreboding hung in the air like a dense fog, blurring the lines of reality as she delved deeper into the crumbling remnants of the once bustling psychiatric facility. The flicker of her flashlight created brief specters that danced along peeling walls, illuminating faded reminders of patients long since vanished. It wasn't merely curiosity that drove Claire. She was searching for traces of her brother, Liam, who had disappeared here 3 years earlier, swallowed by the whispers of madness that clung to the walls like cobwebs. As she ventured further inside, the stale air morphed into something more tangible, a suffocating cloak that stung with the metallic taste of rust, a haunting reminder of blood and despair. Her heartbeat quickened with every creak of the floor beneath her worn boots, the sounds of a building alive with unspeakable memories. Shadows sprawled along the floor, taunting her, reminding her of the darkness that had consumed her family long before Liam had vanished. The place pulsed with an inexplicable energy, an echo of tortured souls that sent shivers down her spine, urging her to turn back. Yet she pressed on. The flickering light led her to the common room, where remnants of furniture lay scattered like corpses, strewn across the floor amidst an uncanny stillness. Sunlight from shivering cracks in the windows turned the dust motes into tiny orbs of light, and for a moment she envisioned happier days with Liam, his laughter blending with the echoes of children playing. But the happiness dissolved, and a strange chill penetrated her thoughts. As her gaze wandered over the ruin, something shifted in the corner, a fleeting shadow that slipped away before she could catch it. Instinctively, she tightened her grip on the flashlight, feeling a primal chill creep along her spine, igniting a spark of doubt in her heart. Frustration clawed at her as she scoured each room, each unlocked door a haunting reminder of what could have been. In one room, she found a journal, its pages yellowed and tinged with dark stains, revealing the fragmented thoughts of a patient named Evelyn. The words danced erratically across the pages, speaking of visions and whispers that urged her toward the forbidden. Claire's intuition screamed that Evelyn's terror might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. Yet dread intertwining with curiosity pulled her deeper into the abyss. As she pieced together fragments of Evelyn's mind, Claire felt the environment shift, the air thickening as if something beyond her perception emerged from the shadows to scrutinize her. A low hum resonated through the building, vibrating through her bones and feeding the dread that nestled in her gut. It felt alive, twisting around her like a serpent, constricting and suffocating. The walls pulsed in tandem with her heartbeat, and she could almost hear the soft whispers, a cacophony of pleading voices entreating her to leave, to escape before it was too late. In her fervor, she stumbled upon the electroshock therapy room, its metal tables glistening grotesquely under the beam of her flashlight, now focusing on this macabre setting that spoke of trauma and hopelessness. Her heart thrummed fiercely against her chest as she found remnants of rusted tools, each item a testament to the atrocities that had occurred within these walls. It was a portal into the darkness that had consumed her brother, a reminder that, often, healing was a euphemism for suffering. Just as she began to retreat, an unexpected scuttling sound clawed at her ears, rising with urgency, as if warning her that she was not alone. Suddenly, the lights extinguished, plunging her into blackness. As a rush of cold enveloped her, heart racing, Claire fumbled for her flashlight, and as the beam pierced the heavy darkness, it illuminated a figure standing at the far end of the room. The silhouette was familiar, yet ghastly. Claire's breath hitched as recognition collided with horror. Hair disheveled and skin translucent, Liam, or what was left of him, stood there, eyes sunken and hollow, weary of the chains that bound him to this cursed place. Liam's mouth opened, but the words echoed within her mind instead of being spoken. "You shouldn't have come." In a flash, the journal's words resonated in her thoughts, warnings of something that lay beneath the surface of sanity. As the chilling realization struck, a grotesque laughter erupted around her, as if the very building was mocking her intrusion. The tears streamed down her face, perplexing layers of love and horror, collapsing into despair at the sight of her brother, or the deranged semblance of him. Without thought, she dashed for the door, but an unseen barrier pressed against her, stifling her movements as whispers enveloped her, contorting her perception. "Stay, become one of us," they beckoned, an invitation soaked in malice, rendering her limbs heavy with dread. The shadows swayed with anticipation, eager for her descent into madness. Clawing at her sanity, the entity behind those sinister voices began to weave nightmares into her mind, a fear so gut-wrenching it twisted her stomach in knots. Just as hopelessness crept upon her like a tightening noose, she heard a familiar voice from within the chaos, urging her to fight, to remember who she was. With a surge of resilience fueled by memories of laughter and shared moments, she wrested herself free from the suffocating darkness. The barrier shattered like glass, and she sprinted through the disheveled halls, frantically searching for her escape. Yet past the threshold of each door the entity awaited, each threshold marking yet another step deeper into the abyss of her worst fears. Finally, Claire burst through the main doors, the night air crashing against her like a tidal wave, awakening her from the nightmare that devoured the very essence of the building. She gulped down the cool breeze, a rush of adrenaline propelling her toward the dilapidated gate and the gravel road beyond. Relief surged within her, but as she glanced back at the looming structure, the shadows cast by the moon revealed a sinister form, a coalition of faces twisted in agony, watching her with hollow eyes. The amalgamation of bodies that had once been lost to the horrors of Ashhaven. Panic set in as she realized she hadn't escaped. She had merely become an unwilling spectator, forever tethered to the anguish that lingered in the air. The darkness whispered promises of her brother, a lie offering comfort but bringing only despair. As she stumbled away, the reality struck hard. No matter how far she ran, the echoes of Ashhaven would plague her, forever gnawing at her sanity. A chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. The night loomed heavy with the weight of what she had uncovered. A truth that would haunt her dreams and tether her soul to the echoes of madness she had narrowly escaped, but could never truly flee. In the heart of a desolate urban sprawl where the sun rarely broke through the cacophony of towering buildings, a flickering neon sign buzzed incessantly in the damp air. It read, "Welcome to Darlow's End," a derelict motel with peeling paint, and the unmistakable scent of mildew that clung to its walls like a shroud. Evelyn had been drawn to it like a moth to a flame, seeking refuge from a world that had long grown weary of her impending doom. The moment she stepped inside, the air thickened, a miasma of regret and despair encasing her like a shroud. The lobby was dimly lit, its only light source the sickly glow of the neon sign outside filtering in through a grimy window. A creaking staircase loomed in the corner, leading to upper rooms that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Secrets Evelyn was unaware of, but increasingly curious to unveil. Her decision to stay here, however, felt like the first brush of ice against her spine, a telltale sign of the darkness that lingered just out of reach. The night was still young, yet an oppressive silence settled over the place, wrapped around her like a tightly drawn noose, squeezing the air from her lungs. Evelyn's fingers ran along the rough countertop of the worn reception desk, leaving ghostly trails in the thick layer of dust that had settled there. Almost instinctively, she felt the weight of unseen eyes on her. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled as she glanced over her shoulder, eyes darting toward the shadowed corners. Was it just her imagination, or was there something lurking, waiting? Her heart raced, not in panic, but in a curious anticipation that sent a tremor coursing through her. When she finally stumbled upon room 12, the door creaked ominously as she pushed it open. The air within felt stale, as though it had been untouched for decades, thick with the scent of decay and something more primal. The setting sun cast elongated shadows across the floor, and for a moment Evelyn thought she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. A flicker, a fleeting shape that vanished into the dark corners of the room. She shook her head, dismissing it as fatigue, yet the feeling of being watched persisted. That night, sleep eluded her. The sounds of the outside world faded into an unfamiliar rumble, replaced by the low thrumming of something alive just beneath the surface of the walls. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinguishable cacophony that echoed her inner turmoil. Ghosts of her past loomed large in her mind, the people she had lost, the love once bright now extinguished by grief. As she wrestled with these memories, the walls themselves felt as if they were closing in, demanding she confront the ghosts she desperately wanted to forget. A sudden movement caught her eye. Closer, a shadow flitted across the room. A darting figure too quick to discern, and with it came a chill so profound it felt as though the bone-deep cold of the outside winter had seeped in. With trembling hands, Evelyn reached for the bedside lamp, her heart pounding in her ears. As she flicked the switch, the bulb flickered before casting a sickly yellow light that seemed to draw the darkness tighter around her. The night wore on as she battled between sleep and wakefulness, reality and nightmare. Moments twisted into hours, and then just as she thought dawn would break, a knock echoed through the room. Soft at first and then insistent, it reverberated within her chest. Swallowing hard, she peered through the peephole, but her pulse quickened. There was no one there. She hesitated, a sense of overwhelming dread creeping in as she contemplated whatever was waiting beyond the flimsy barrier. By the next morning, exhaustion gnawed at her bones, yet it was not fatigue that turned her stomach. It was a profound sense of belonging, an unsettling connection to the motel itself. The walls seemed to hum with life, the very air thickening with a conspiracy of despair. Stumbling outside for a breath of fresh air, she was halted by an inescapable sight. A makeshift shrine of flower bouquets, tarnished photographs, and cracked candles. A memorial to the lost souls who had once passed through Darlow's End. Motivated by morbid curiosity and a growing sense of urgency, Evelyn began to piece together the stories of those trapped in this forgotten place, each life intersecting with her own in a chilling mosaic of grief and sorrow. They whispered warnings of unfinished business. The line between the living and the dead blurred further with each revelation, peeling away her layers of denial until she was raw and exposed. Each night, the shadow grew bolder, its presence thickening until it became almost palpable. As unearthed truths clawed at her sanity, she felt a compulsion to confront the shade that haunted her sleep. With trepidation, she began to speak to it, her words reverberating against the cracked walls. But it did not answer. Instead, it drew closer, its form beginning to solidify, offering a reflection of Evelyn's own anguished visage. The image of her lost love appeared before her, twisted into a grotesque parody of the man she remembered, his features contorted by betrayal and abandon. The shadows churned, and the realization struck like ice in her veins. She was the architect of her own despair. Each moment spent lost in the realms of regret gave power to the entity before her, feeding on her guilt as it grew in stature, shifting from a whisper into a scream. The true horror of Darlow's End revealed itself. It was a prison for the broken-hearted and eternal cycle of grief that consumed its captives whole. With a sudden surge of clarity, Evelyn understood. The motel didn't just hold memories, it was a breeding ground for them, an echo chamber feeding on sorrow and regret. In her quest to escape the past, she had unwittingly tethered herself to this place, the entity she faced demanding recognition of her pain in a manner too intimate to bear. She wanted to run, to flee, but her feet were bogged down by the very emotions she sought to escape. In a final, desperate confrontation, Evelyn embraced the shadow, welcoming the anguish she had denied for so long. The weight of her sorrow enveloped her, becoming a part of her flesh, a succession of memories that could not simply be cast aside. The darkness promised liberation if she let it consume her, a release from the torment of carrying the past. As she succumbed to it, the motel bore witness to yet another soul engulfed in its unending cycle, her essence melding with the countless others whispered throughout its haunted halls. Days later, another traveler arrived at Darlow's End, drawn to its allure and the comforting embrace of morning. As she crossed the threshold, the ghostly flicker of the neon sign buzzed ominously, heralding the arrival of another soul destined to join the ranks of the lost, whispering with the subtlety of decay. And deep within the shadows, Evelyn lingered, a silent guardian bound to guide the next weary heart through the desolate corridors of despair, an echo in a place that would never forget.